Anyway, there's lots to get to. Let's get to it first. Sam Cooper says, I've been investigating media and politicians in Canada, naming names, and will do more. This report is being presented in Ottawa November 30th. U.S. intelligence is concerned UF and Chinese mafia have co-opted some Canadian media and senior politicians. Some. Just some? Whew. Yeah, and the others have been bankrupt by these co-opted media and politicians. It's pretty wild. And it says hubs for transnational criminals and terrorists financiers. And it says China's political warfare arm, the United Front, that's UF, is believed to be supported in part by proceeds from a variety of criminal enterprises and receives guidance and direction through the Chinese embassy and consulate in Canada. AOC and the United Front networks are observed operationally through a myriad of benevolent businesses and friendship associations that are commonly linked to Canada's Indigenous communities, universities, TV and media, municipal, provincial, and national political and business circles. Key involvement in the illicit cannabis trade, wineries, and mining sector are also noted. So that's a lot of different verticals to have your fingers in the pie, right? That's a lot of different areas to have influence in. Wow, impressive. So the triads can have their fingers in every single pie. However, the government is tracking your every move. Yeah, CBC Watcher is reporting this from the CBC, and this is a quote from the article. Spyware, normally associated with the intelligence world, is being used by 13 federal departments and agencies according to contracts obtained under access to information legislation and shared with Radio Canada. So federal departments using spyware, Fisheries and Oceans Canada, Environment and Climate Change Canada. So Stephen Guilbeault is getting your information. Do the Canadian people believe Stephen Guilbeault? No, they don't. Canada Revenue Agency, that's not surprising. Shared, although I don't know why they'd need to spy on you. They know everything about you already. Shared Services Canada, Competition Bureau Canada, Global Affairs Canada, Transportation Safety Board of Canada, Natural Resources Canada, Correctional Services Canada, Canada Border Services Agency, National Defence, and Royal Canadian Mounted Police. That is, all of that is not surprising to me, but it is surprising that more people don't really seem to care about what they're doing or not doing with your data. Here's a bit more of the article. Spyware normally associated with the intelligence world is being used, blah, blah, blah. Radio Canada has also learned that these departments' use of the spyware did not undergo a privacy impact assessment as required by federal government directive. The tools in question can be used to recover and analyze data found on computers, tablets, and mobile phones, including information that has been encrypted and password protected. This can include text messages, contacts, photos, and travel history. Certain software can also be used to access a user's cloud-based data, reveal their intranet search history, deleted content, and social media activity. Radio Canada has learned other departments have obtained some of these tools in the past, but say they no longer use them, and I've already read out that list. Evan Light, Associate Professor of Communications at York University's Glendon campus in Toronto, and an expert in privacy and surveillance technology, said he's shocked by the widespread use of such spyware with the federal government, or within the federal government. It's worrisome and dangerous, he said, who filed the original access to information request to find out more about how police agencies in Canada are using the technology. I thought I would just find the usual suspects using these devices like police, whether it's the RCMP or Canada's Border Service Agency, but it's been used by a bunch of bizarre departments, he said. According to the documents, Light shared with Radio Canada, Shared Services Canada purchased the equipment and software for the end use from the suppliers Celebrite, Magnet Forensics, and Grayshift. The latter two companies merged earlier this year. The companies say they've developed strict controls to ensure their technologies are used in accordance with the law, according to their website. Right. So it is really, really interesting. They're definitely abiding by the law. And I just don't... It's funny because during the Freedom Convoy, they were doing exercises, flying around with planes, testing surveillance equipment, right? And they say this is totally within the law. Great, but I mean, how are you justifying that? And is it valid? Has it been tested in court? And the answer is, I don't think so. But it seems they'll say, oh, yeah, it's totally above board, and people will carry on with that. And that's interesting. Moving on a little bit, governance. We've got a little grab bag of governance. There's a couple of indicators, again, for an election coming up soon. Here's one, potential one. Holly Doan is reporting, Liberal cabinet reneges on 2022 vote pact with the Jagmeet Singh. Written promise to pass pharmacare legislation by December 31st will not be met. So there you go. Take that, right? Justin Trudeau is not going to do it. You can't make him. So is Jagmeet Singh going to continue the confidence and supply agreement? Yes, I think he's going to be incentivized to he's a young global leader, and there's a lot of different reasons why I think that he would do it. So let me know what you think. Do you think that he's going to trigger a snap election in the spring because he thinks he's going to be prime minister? I don't think so. He might get opposition later. He might move into Pierre Poilievre's house. That'd be funny. I think if I was Pierre Poilievre, I'd leave a letter, like to the next person who next lives here type deal. Anyway, Mel Jolie says, as a NATO member, we are committed to strengthening our alliance to do more to support the global order and to stand firm in upholding democracies around the world. Lots of people are pushing back on this. It's not a huge ratio, but we're getting there. James says, we are not okay with supporting a global order. We are a sovereign country. Screw you and your globalist thoughts. And Jenny says, support Canada first. And so it's interesting. People are pushing back on this idea of, global world order. It's the G7 and SWIFT countries, it seems like. But G7 is probably a better descriptor, maybe G20. They have been very arrogant they think that what they say is how the world works. And I don't know that that's actually true. I bet you there are places in the world that would laugh at that prospect, right? Oh yeah, the G7 is super important in their own head, right? Yeah, I think maybe an inflated sense of self-importance and a bit of an inflated ego in the West is something that we do suffer, collectively, right? The West is so good that we set the tone and the pace for the rest of the world, but really the rest of the world doesn't necessarily adhere to the beliefs that we hold in the West. Anyway. It's interesting. It's weird, right? And it's so Africa, they've got female genital mutilation. Most people would say that's bad, right? I can remember people having not impassioned arguments about it, but, making an argument like you shouldn't do that to a human being and so on and so forth. And I would, generally agree, but I thought it seems a little bit of a weird thing to grandstand about, but all right. And fast forward, and now you've got people who are being told that if you mutilate yourself, you can switch genders or sexes or something like that. And not only is it possible, but it is celebrated, and you're a brave little flower and all the rest. And it's crazy. It's around the bend, and I just didn't expect it to. I didn't expect it to do what it's done. The whole thing is just. I can't even believe that the West is collectively numb to what's going on. Nobody's upset. Nobody's worried about this. Nobody's impassionately saying we shouldn't do this to unsuspecting children. Everybody's like, but what about their gender identity? Oh, what about their biological sex organ that you're mutilating there? Anyway, moving on. Yes. CBC Watcher again says, why is this post still up, Ken? So Ken Hardy, kind of speculated that Pierre Poilievre was to blame because of his right-wing rhetoric. I'll just read it again because it's ridiculous. And I thought he'd take it down, but he hasn't taken it down. Beyond troubling, says Ken, to see another mass shooting in Canada now in Winnipeg, and we've lost so many police officers. Maybe it's the antisocial, burn everything down, far-right attitude we're seeing creeping in from the U.S. and the creep on the Canadian side, Pierre Poilievre. What a weird thing. So apparently, Karina Gould hauled him into a meeting. They had a meeting. And a National Post headline and article presumably was fed into the AI, and this is what it spat out. Liberal MP apologizes for linking Poilievre to Winnipeg shootings. Ken Hardy changed his tune following a meeting with government House leader Karina Gould, but he left the tweet up. That's a live tweet right there. So, live X post. So, weird, right? Don't you think that's strange? I think that's strange. Of weird things that happen, right? I'm very, very sorry for this statement I've made and keep up to this day that I'm apologetic for. Phil says, Ombudsman rules CBC not obliged to use terrorists instead of militants to describe Hamas. This is utter nonsense and more indication of CBC's fall from responsible reporting, says Phil. Now, I disagree. I think that if you start, I think it's a really weird, slippery slope to get into trying to police the words used by media to describe certain people specifically. Like, I think this is a bridge too far for me to believe that it is blindly exactly the right thing to do and to unquestionably go along with it. I think that it is very interesting that people are like, this is an opinion piece. Oh no, this is even news. So the ombudsman has weighed in on this and says that there's no journalistic standard that's being violated here. I'll read you the article in a minute, but it is incredible that there are people who have made complaints, and they say hundreds of complaints here, but there are people that have made complaints, and because of the number of complaints, they want the use of the term terrorist to be enforced, right, rather than militant. Wild stuff. And I just think, regardless of what you describe Hamas people as, I don't think that it should be up to the mob to decide. I don't think it should be up to, like an ideological group of people who get enough people together to make it seem like big enough, that you should listen to them, right? It seems strange. Okay, here's the article. CBC not obliged to use terrorists instead of militants to describe Hamas, says ombudsman. The decision to describe Hamas as militants has led to hundreds of complaints against the public broadcaster. Hundreds. Oh my gosh, hundreds, really. How big is Canada again? How many millions of people? Right, hundreds. CBC is not obliged to use terrorists instead of militants. In an interview report posted on CBC's website on November 23rd, Jack Nagler said the Crown Corporation's coverage of the October 7th attack was executed well in some, but not all instances, including in a flagship radio program. Nagler highlighted two policies outlined in the CBC's journalistic standards and practices, which functions as a style guide and framework for best practices in its reporting. The passages state that they need to clearly explain the facts to our audience without promoting any particular point of view. There was no breach of the JSP, but there was room for improvement nonetheless, Nagler noted. So I think that it's interesting when your journalistic standards say you have to clearly explain the facts without promoting any particular point of view. I think that if you called Hamas people terrorists, that's probably coloring what people think of the Hamas people, right? Call them militants. It brings up another thing in people's head. Anyway, regardless, I don't know. Do you think they're right? Or do you think that the CBC is right for the way they've described it? Or do you think that the mob is right and they should be described as terrorists? In New Zealand, they were going to ban smoking completely. And I lived through the early 2000s while smoking, and they banned smoking inside in bars. And then you went out and smoked outside, right? But you brought your drink with you. And our bar refused to go by the rules. We were a private club for years, and they left us alone for a long time. It was like 3 years later until people started getting fines. Anyway, regardless of that, in the New Zealand and in the United Kingdom, they wanted to start making it so, like, if you were born after 2009, you couldn't buy cigarettes, and if you were born after 2000, and then they were going maybe just that. I thought they were going to have a rolling, like, as people get older or whatever. But regardless, if you're older, you could still buy cigarettes, but if you're younger, you can't anymore. And New Zealand's backing off their plan, and the UK is not. So that's interesting. Here's CTV News reporting that. New Zealand's new government scraps world-leading smoking ban to fund tax cuts. Now, the obvious response to this is the black market, right? Like, okay, you can have heroin, you can have fentanyl. We'll give you a safe supply of fentanyl. That is your dignity. You have a right to be an addict. And we as a community have a responsibility to give you safe drugs for free. I don't know why, but apparently we do. But if you're a smoker and you pay taxes, you're just not allowed to be a smoker anymore. Sorry. You better take up some heroin, buddy, because that comes for free down at the safe injection site. or fentanyl, I guess, right? Whatever, but not smoking, right? Because that's addictive. Right. It's pretty wild stuff. So welcome to the world. I mean, to be fair, that's New Zealand and not Canada, right? So Canada is not in the situation yet where they're turning off the smoking, but it would be a huge black market. That's an opportunity, right? If the government says no, right, then somebody on the black market's going to say yes, right? Here you go. Yes, I have some cigarettes. Sure do, right? And so it's going to be a huge black market, massive black market, and the government doesn't usually remember prohibition. That didn't work out so well for the prohibitionists. Anyway, back to this. Michael Chong says, no taxation without representation is a fundamental constitutional principle. The elected House of Commons alone grants aids and supplies, SO 80. That's the sitting order 80, I believe. The House passes Bill C-234. The Senate blocks it. Will the Prime Minister direct his government rep in the Senate to pass this tax bill? So Bill C-234 has passed the House of Commons over and atop the Liberals who voted against it. And because Justin Trudeau controls the Senate is dragging their feet and they're not passing this bill. The bill was originally passed in February, but nothing actually has gotten done on it because it has not received royal assent. And so that's not good, right? Because that's partisan politics playing into it. Here is part of the House discussion on this.
The honourable member from Wellington, Halton Hills.
Mr. Speaker, it doesn't matter what the government thinks about Bill C-234. It doesn't matter what the Senate thinks about the bill because taxation and spending are the exclusive right of this House, not the Senate. In our system, there is no taxation without representation. Section 53 of the Constitution says all financial legislation must originate in this House. Standing Order 80 says that this House alone grants aids and supplies. When will the Prime Minister direct his representative in the Senate to respect this democratic institution, the only democratic institution in this country, and pass the tax bill?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I mean, the irony coming from the other side of the House is almost too thick to handle today when we hear members' office talking about respecting democracy or democratic institutions. There's a pattern of behavior here that I thought was, maybe just with the Leader of the Opposition. I didn't expect it from the member from Wellington, Halton Hills. But as he would know, there are no Liberals.
That is gaslighting 101. I just wanted to make sure everybody saw the depths that these Liberals will go to just lie to the Canadian public. It's incredible. It is absolutely incredible to watch. And then it's not honest. She's not expressing concern. She's trying to paint those people with the brush of kooks, liar. She's trying to throw everything she can at them, and she'll go with whatever sticks. Whatever people start talking about, she'll say, yes, I have heard that. Terrible. Holly Doan says MPs on Commons Operations Committee failed to identify who awarded sweetheart contracts to a ArriveCan consultant. Question was asked 32 times. Nobody wants to take responsibility. I'm not surprised. The idea that we're going to get accountability keeps being very elusive. I don't know that I believe that we are going to get accountability because of the depths, again, of the corruption that we're facing. It is very deep corruption. Andrew Scheer says, no notes, no recording devices, destroy the copies. There really must be something really bad in the $44 billion worth of contracts. Trudeau won't tell us how many foreign replacement workers he's paid for, and now his MPs are desperately trying to keep the contract hidden. So this is the rules. And I'll play the first minute or maybe a little longer than that. But the rules for people who want to go and view the contracts for the battery plants that the government has spent our tax dollars on, that I think are going to be useless by 2028, because I think it would be apparent by then that the electric car is a lemon. It's not something that's going to happen. It's not going to work. It is. Here are the rules.
That in Part E, after the words provided that, the following be added. When these documents are received by the clerk, which then creates a new F, they be available at the clerk's office for viewing, by committee members only for 1 week to be designated by the committee no later than 30 days following the receipt of the contracts, under the supervision of the clerk, and that no personal mobile, electronic, or recording devices of any kind be permitted in the room that week, and that no notes be taken out of the room. This then creates a new G, which reads as follows. Representatives of innovation, science, and economic development be invited to appear for a 2-hour in-camera meeting, and that during the meeting, only committee members and support staff required for the meeting be permitted to attend, and that no personal mobile, electronic, or recording devices of any kind be permitted in the room during the meeting. That, during the meeting, numbered paper copies of the documents be given to committee members who are present in person by the clerk at the beginning of said meeting, and that these copies be returned to the clerk at the end of the meeting, and that the clerk be instructed to destroy said copies, and that no notes be taken out of the room. And then what is now F would become H, and it reads, and as follows, that redacted versions of be added before these documents. So it reads as follows. That redacted versions of these documents shall be deposited with the clerk of the committee and then change 1 week to 3 weeks, and that the words and without redactions and be published on the committee's website be deleted. So to clarify, it would then read as follows. H, that redacted version.
You get the idea. They are doing everything they can. You can't bring in electronic devices. You can't have notes. You can't have unredacted anything. If you have an unredacted note, you give it in and it gets destroyed. They do not want any of the information coming out. They don't want anybody to know about details about these battery plants or these battery anything contracts. Because it's probably all foreign workers. Here is government is corrupt. This is Finance Minister Freeland, and this is going, I'm not sure if this is going back a long way, but they're talking about interest rates and how interest rates are low. We talked yesterday about how, and I can't listen to Chrystia Freeland again today. Not right now, not for this. But she's saying, I understand you're saying the economy is bad, but the GDP is, or the debt to GDP is the lowest in the G7, right? But if you look, there's a point in this video where she's talking about that, and there it is, and it shows the debt that Trudeau's brought in, right? And it's like Trudeau's debt by himself, $662 billion. All other prime ministers combined, $630 billion. So Justin Trudeau is by far and away the most expensive prime minister, and Chrystia Freeland is saying, don't worry about all that debt. Our debt is the lowest in the G7. And I think that doesn't take into account all of the factors, right? There could be reasons for that. How does our population stack up? Is there a correlation there? Right? There's lots of other questions. But fundamentally, I don't think that Chrystia Freeland is a very good steward of our fiscal anything. And it's a big mistake to put our country's trust in a Rhodes Scholar reporter. Brian Lilly is talking is responding to Don Darling. Don Darling says, in 6 months, Pierre Poilievre billed taxpayers $3,374,000 and change in expenses, averaging $562,000 per month and change. While talking about food banks and living in a taxpayer-funded home, his expenses could cover a caviar. We need integrity, actions, and words to align. Who is Mr. Pierre Poilievre, right? Dun, dun, dun. But it's funny because none of that is really true. Brian Lilly kind of highlights this. He says this is a lie. It's his total office expenses for running the official opposition. This would be like the Conservatives putting out the total expenses of the PMO or of the government of Canada and claiming it as Trudeau's personal expenses. So yeah, it's disingenuous. And people can tell that that's not true. They may not know exactly how it's not true, but they can tell that it's not a genuine thing that's going on. They don't know why it isn't. And I'm glad Brian Lilly highlighted why, but yeah, pretty wild stuff. Do you live in Ontario? Canada is a very highly taxed jurisdiction anyway, but Ontario is highly taxed too. Here's what happens if you make $1 million in Canada. And I mean, I don't make $1 million in Canada yet. I'm on the way. Federal taxes is $303,000 on $1 million. That's a lot of money. $300,000 on $1 million is federal taxes. That's yearly. That's a lot of money, man. Provincial taxes is $189,000. Canada Pension Plan is $3,754, which I think is pretty funny. And employment insurance is $1,000. Total deductions $497,898. And net pay just over $500,000, 502,101. Highway robbery. What are they doing with all that money? You know what I'm saying? Holy cow. The federal government takes $300,000 of your income tax every year. What do you get from that? $300,000. Like, what kind of how good does Netflix have to be to not blink at that? Really? Because there's enough people who make $1 million or close to $1 million, right? And even at $300,000, if you're making $376,000 and they take $150,000 of your tax of your paycheck, that's a lot of money. Or $100,000, like that's a lot of money, right? Holy smoke. Okay, a third, right? Like that's a third. Maybe the taxation in the 100,000 level is less punishing, but it's still, even at the 80,000 level, right? 80,000, 90,000, $100,000 level, it's still very punishing. It's very high. There's no reason for it to be that high. Hello, everyone. Thanks very much for watching. This is just a short version of a longer show. If you'd like to get the whole show, you can go over to CanadaPoly.com and sign up for a subscription. Just look in the drop-down tab for Shop and Donate and look for subscriptions, and you'll get immediate access to the full show. Love to see you. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a wonderful, wonderful